Well, it's 11:31, so I guess we'll get going here and people can log in as they sign up here. So hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your lunch break to be a part of this webinar. So today we're going to be talking about HR for your business. So hopefully you're in the right spot. If you're not, stick around anyway, you might learn something new today. So just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. So everyone that's logged in has been muted with no video. So if you have any questions, just put them in the chat box and we'll get to them at the very end when you do the Q&A portion of the webinar. So I'd encourage you guys to stick around for that. Also, if you like, you can select the speaker view instead of the gallery view. So that's just at the top right-hand corner of your screen there. That'll just allow you to see us a little bit better as you go through this webinar, but feel free to use whatever works best for you. So for those that haven't met me before, I'm Sharon. I'm the owner of an interior design company here in Edmonton called Weaver Design. I'll share my contact information in the chat group in a moment, but we're a full service interior design company. So we offer services ranging from paint consultations and window coverings to construction drawing packages and project management services. So everything related to interior design, we do it. So as I'm sure a lot of you have been aware of, like things have been very challenging these last few months. I know a lot of small businesses are really struggling right now. The economy hasn't been the greatest these last few years, and with everything happening with COVID, things have only become more difficult. So I'm really passionate about supporting our communities and helping other local businesses. So I really wanted to do something to help these small businesses. So we started doing these live webinars and we're trying to do them every third Wednesday. So a few weeks ago, we did one with Michael Draper. He's a realtor with Edmonton HQ. So if you're interested in that topic, you can head to our website, weaverdesign.ca/webinar, and you can watch the recording for that. So anyways, my goal with this is to connect other local businesses with people that you may not have been aware of before. Hopefully we'll inspire you and teach you something new. So today we're here with Ashley McCarney. She's the owner of Involvi Consulting. I've known Ashley for 6 years now. She's just such a wonderful person. She's really passionate about what she does. She's been in the human resource industry for about 9 years now. So she has lots of experience with her. And she recently went on to start her own company, Involvi Consulting. So we're excited to chat with her today and learn more about her industry. So thank you, Ashley, for being a part of this today. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Great. So for those that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about your background as an HR consultant and how you started Involvi Consulting?
Sure. So, as most of us, we look to find our passions with work because work is sometimes more important than our families because we spend so much time at work, right? And so it's really important to love what you do. And I think the journey for that is different for everybody. And so as I grew through my career in HR, I always felt there's something missing or it wasn't quite my calling. And so in the last year and a half, I actually gave birth to my son. And over mat leave, I thought, okay, now it's really time to refocus. I've got some time away from day-to-day work, even though I had another full-time job being a mom, and really thought, okay, what do I want to do? And, a few things happened throughout that year that kind of allowed me to really consider opening my own business and utilizing the skills over the last, as you said, 9, I would say more like 11 to 15 years. To help small and medium businesses and business owners make employment relationships seamless. So I started Involvi Consulting with the aim of working with business owners that want HR support rather than just, checking a box and saying, I've got HR. Because HR is a lot more than just an administrative function. We work with budgets, we work with strategic planning, we work with employees, we work with leaders, and essentially it's the people within the business that mostly make the business successful. And so my focus there is to work with leaders and the employees to make that happen. So I started Involvi Consulting last September. And as I said, working with small to medium businesses. So it's been a great journey so far.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you here today.
Thank you.
So I know COVID is still a topic that's on everyone's mind, as much as I'm sure we're all a little tired about hearing about it. We're going into phase 2 of the relaunch, and hopefully the numbers obviously continue to do well so we can move into phase 3. So businesses are
Right.
starting to open up again, and people are starting to come back to work if they haven't done so already. So
Right.
employees are, some are still choosing to work from home, whether that's a temporary change or something a little bit more permanent. I know I can see a lot of businesses are now changing the way that they operate. I think business owners are realizing that they can still function with a lot of their staff working from home, and they might actually be more productive that way. They don't have the commute time of driving to and from work. There's less of the downtime with, chatting at the coffee station and that morning chat. And so it can be more productive, I think. So for those that are working from home, whether permanent or not, how would you say, how can they properly monitor their staff doing remote work? Like, what advice would you have for those people?
Yeah, so I mean, you touched on a couple things there that I think are important to note in addition to your question. But to answer your question first, I think there's a lot of employers wondering, oh, can I put remote monitors on their computers so that I can see what they're doing at all times? And can I tap into their video camera to make sure they're sitting at their desk? And I mean, I would say the answer is no. I'm not an employment lawyer. And if you have extreme questions like that that kind of go into that legal, I would recommend you reach out to your employment lawyer,
For sure.
or through me to my employment lawyer. But in terms of managing their work remotely, you can set up a kind of a work from home document and an accountability sheet, so that
Okay.
every single day, we call it a daily task list. The employer, much like a consultant or a lawyer, would say, okay, I spent 5 hours with this client doing, bullet point of things. I spent 2 hours with this client. And so, it may at the beginning come across a little micromanagey, but it is one of the aspects that employers can take advantage of if they want to monitor their productivity at home. And the other thing is making sure that you outline as the employer what your hours of work expectations are. Because as you said, a lot of employers are saying, hey, you've been working from home. Why don't you keep working from home? My husband is one of them. And so with that said, it's important for you to say, but our hours are 9 to 5 and I need you to be available 9 to 5. I need you to be working those hours. And other ones are like, you know what? Here's your accountabilities. Here's your expectations. As long as you complete them by the deadline, that's all we ask. And so setting that ahead of time is really important so that the employee knows, okay, these are the boundaries that I have to work in. And it makes sure everything is clear.
Absolutely. Like you said, I think it's talking to those professionals and having that flexibility and just finding out what works best for you and your business.
Yeah.
So on that topic, with a lot of people returning back to work, of course, there are going to be those that aren't completely comfortable going back into the office for a number of different reasons. Perhaps they're immune compromised themselves, or they're caring for somebody that is. I know personally, like my grandma lives with my mom at home. She has a basement suite, and my mom is still working right now, but she's partially working from home, and then she's going into the office periodically. So there's a lot of back and forth. So there's definitely that concern there. I mean, my grandma's fairly healthy, but she's still in that age category where she is more vulnerable. So there's going to be lots of people like that with similar situations. So how would you suggest we rebuild that confidence for those staff that are returning back to work?
Yeah, so I think there's two veins to that. The first one is make sure you follow Alberta Health Services guidelines, make sure you follow the guidelines for your phase, and make sure you understand the flow of traffic within your organization, whether it's an office or a retail customer welcome environment, because there are certain guidelines you have to follow.
Yeah.
And so that's the first step, is communicating to your employees, look, we've followed everything we're required to do. And then from there, it's really about communication. You cannot over communicate to your staff during a time like this, and following through with what you say you're going to do. So, I've suggested to some of my clients to put a document in place that says, this is our reopen strategy, and these are some of the things that we're doing. And these are the requirements we have of you as an employee before coming back into the office. So that they have it in writing, you've talked to them. I would also encourage them to do a training, like a Zoom webinar, so that you're appealing to all of those learning styles, whether they like to read, they like to hear, that kind of thing. And just really answer their questions and empathize that, you know, we're all going through this together. And so,
Absolutely.
you know, if I had employees right now that were, you know, in this, part of this concern, we'll say, you know, I would just empathize and say, you know what, I'm going through this pandemic at the same time you are. And yes, I've done my research, and yes, I'm the business owner, but we're all going through this together for the first time. It's new territory that we've never been through before. And we're all human, so we're bound to make mistakes. But as the employer, we will learn from our mistakes. We will empathize with your concerns and ensure the safety and health of all of our employees and our customers. So I just, you know, in addition to the legislative, it's just, you can't over communicate.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. Like you said, we're all learning this together. This is the first time we're all going through this. So it's just being understanding and listening to your employees and what they have to say. And yeah.
And then just to
go
jump
ahead.
in if it can on something you touched on earlier, you know, you said a lot of employers may say, hey, you know, you don't have to come back, you can stay at home. One of the best practices I've seen is to ask your employees what they want. If you've got the flexibility within your organization, survey your employees to say, do you want to come back now? Do you want to work from home full time? Do you want to do 50-50? Because as much as people are saying, I love working from home, I'm more productive, I can do a load of laundry on my lunch break, or I can go do this, right? There are some people that may not be as vocal that aren't okay with working at home, and their mental state has been affected, and you know, they're not comfortable working from home. They need that interaction. They need that day-to-day change of scenery. And so this more than ever is a time to listen to your employees, because mental health and physical health are of paramount concern for employers. And we need to make sure that we're asking those questions.
Yes, absolutely. I think we all assume that we all love working from home because you have that flexibility. And like you said, you can do some chores in the middle of the day and kind of revamp your schedule. But not everyone thrives in an environment. And some people have a really hard time being self-motivated or being in environments where there is no staff around, there's no chatter, that's very quiet. And that can take a toll on your mental health when you don't have those people surrounding you. So yeah, I think it's important to check in with your employees and see what they want and what works for them.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So of course, with COVID, a lot of people unfortunately have been laid off and are now looking for work. And not all those people are comfortable having to come into an office and do interviews, or vice versa, right? If you're somebody that's hiring right now, you don't necessarily want all these candidates coming in and out of your office. So you're trying to limit that. So there's probably a lot more video interviews happening right now. So what would you say is the best way to hire and onboard employees remotely? And like, what are some of the pros and cons of doing these video interviews?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Is, I mean, number one, we have to look at, you know, what are our practices with regards to recruiting? And then I think you have to look at your past practice. So if you've always done a phone interview, let's say 2 in-person interviews and then reference checks, and that's been your recipe for success, or whatever your, you know, process has been, I would encourage you not to veer away from that process, but just change the methods that you're interviewing by, so that you know that you've been consistent, and that you're evaluating all your employees consistently. But you know, it is important to check in with those candidates. I mean, even in an in-person interview, if I get a candidate that's, you know, visibly nervous, not answering the questions, I don't think as well as they did on the phone, you know, I would stop the interview and I'd say, okay, you know, this is no need to be nervous. I sense that you're nervous, and I don't know that we're seeing the best sides of you to consider you. And so I want to give you a second to just take a breath. And I think, you know, even though I would do that in person, I would do the same thing on Zoom, because not a lot of people are okay with talking to you through a camera, because if I look down here, I'm looking at you, but if I look up here, you know, and so eye contact is very, very different. And so I don't think employers should put a lot of weight into eye contact, because it's awkward even for people that are experienced. And I would also give them time to understand the reasons for the Zoom. I would give them advance notice of how many people will be on the interview, so that they know going in how many faces they might see or how many people might be asking questions. And then I would consider just running your standard interview questions. Because at the end of the day, you still have a process and the candidates still have to answer. So it is going to throw people a little bit for a loop. But as long as you're an employer that sets the stage properly, provides advanced information that the candidate might need, and then is empathetic through the process, if they need to stop and give them a moment or kind of reframe a question, just understand that this is not normal for everybody, but it's becoming the new normal. So.
Absolutely. I think those are all really good points, Ashley. So thank you.
Of course.
I want to switch gears a little bit. I don't want to make this entire webinar about COVID. Like I said earlier, I think we're all getting a little tired talking about it, even though it's still very much a relevant conversation. So Ashley, what would you say are some of the key tools every business should have at the top of their mind? I'm sure there are a number of different things you could suggest, but maybe some of your top 4, let's say.
Yeah. So with regards to HR tools, I mean, HR in a lot of organizations is revered as an administrative function. And I think it's important, as I said earlier, to understand that HR comes in all forms because it's about managing your people, right? It's human capital management as opposed to just paper pushing management. And because that touches on so many aspects of business, I think number one, employers need to understand their legislative requirements, pardon me. There's Employment Standards Alberta, or within any province that you're watching this from. There's human rights that you have to be cognizant of. There's occupational health and safety, which now ties into a lot of what HR does. I would say, there's a crossover of maybe 25% of the legislation and how it impacts HR. And then your internal policies as well. So making sure that all of those things are up to date, making sure you've got good offer letters, the wording is pertinent. If you've had an employment lawyer read it, then that's probably very important. Just so that you know that you're covered and that your risk is minimal, and that your employees also know that you know what you're talking about and that they can operate within those guidelines as well. So legislation requirements, policies, procedures, offer letters, and then I would really make sure that you keep a pulse on your culture. Especially during COVID and even not during COVID, understanding the culture of your organization is very, very key, because that ties into engagement, it ties into productivity, it ties into turnover, it ties into revenues of your organization and, inventory levels and things like that. And, with going back to your interview question earlier, as well as, COVID, I think culture in this day and age is very unique. And I think we as employers have to think outside the box to engage our employees differently, because we can't have team meetings. So keep an eye out for Zoom fatigue, because that is definitely a thing. You said we are almost more productive now because I can log off, log on, mic off, mic on, video on, video off. And at the end of the day, you've accomplished a lot, but you might be totally tired in a different way. And so I'd encourage you to watch that, but also have team meetings over Zoom. Like, get everybody together once a week just to touch base and see how it's doing. Do a virtual hangout for fun on a number of different platforms, just to get them outside of the Zoom is work, and bring that culture back in. And then the last piece would probably just be understanding your strategic planning. And understanding how people fit into the long-term planning of your business, and whether you need to recruit, whether you need to downsize, whether you need to reorganize some of your people. So yeah, the 4 key tools I'd say are legislation, policies, procedures, keep a pulse on your culture, and then that strategic planning and how the people fit into that.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ashley. I can totally relate to the doing multiple Zoom meetings all the time. And although you are feeling like you're very productive because it's just going from one to the next one, it can get a little exhausting. And I think it is important to keep that office culture and to still have that connection with one another. So
totally. Yeah,
I think that's a great point. So you mentioned you've been in this industry for 10, 11, 12 years. So I'm sure you've seen some challenges. What would you say are some of like the biggest HR challenges for business? I would think that like finding talent all the time is very difficult. And then once you find those people, how do you keep them engaged? and keep them interested so they don't end up going to a different company. I'm sure there's lots of personal issues that come up with employees. So what would you say are some of those big challenges, and how can people deal with that?
Well, how much time do we have left? No, I think, this is a topic that I'm sure we could talk about for the entire webinar.
For sure.
Encourage people, if they have questions and I haven't covered something, reach out to Sharon or myself and we can dive deeper into this. But you hit a number of them on the head. So, finding talent and recruiting talent is a full-time job. There are fabulous, people that do this for a living out there, and really have a knack for finding people. And then, it's about maintaining them. So ensuring that your culture is on point, your engagement of your employees is high, and check in with your employees, do engagement surveys, do pulse surveys, do what I call stay interviews, find out from your current employees why they're staying. Because we all know that we get phone calls all the time from recruiters going, hey, do you want to come work for me? Or, hey, I've got an opportunity. Are you interested? Right? There's a reason they're turning that down. And then I think it's the performance management piece. A lot of times I see that expectations are not set out very clearly, or the communication isn't very clear to employees. So while they think they're operating under this, job description, maybe the employer meant for them to be over here, and the expectations are tweaked a little bit, and that can cause performance issues down the line because it kind of snowballs, right? And so I would encourage clear communication, because performance management and employees meeting the needs of the employer are one of the biggest concerns that I've run into, and just how to manage that in a good way. Because we want employees to grow with companies, not, oh, you're not doing a good job, see you later, right? So it's being able to grow your employees and have those conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think anytime in business, communication is always key for sure, right?
Yeah. And there's a number of other HR challenges, but I'd say with my clients right now, those are some of the highlights.
For sure. Like you said, we could probably do a whole nother webinar on just this topic. So I think you highlighted the key points there. And again, if anyone has any further questions or wants to dive in a little bit deeper about this, our contact information is in the chat box, and I'll send it out again to everyone after this. So if you have any other questions, reach out to Ashley. She'll be happy to help you out. So I want to wrap up this portion of the webinar, but I do want to talk a little bit about office culture. I know you touched on it a little bit already. And I know when people are applying for jobs, it's no longer just about your position and what your role is and salary. Like, those are all important things, but I think personality and how you're going to fit into this office and what the office culture is like is also very important, is becoming more important. So just if you want to talk a little bit more on office culture and what kind of makes a great place to work.
Sure. Yeah. And I think from a candidate's perspective, you touched on it, like job description, qualifications, experience, education, and rate of pay, even title, are some things that really matter to a lot of employees. And I think they're the fundamentals of, hey, I'm going to apply for this job. So does it check those boxes? When an employee digs deeper and looks in the culture, or when a candidate digs deeper, a lot of them are asking about sustainability and what the organization is doing to give back. They're looking for, right now, safety and health and mental health. And so what is the company doing on those standpoints to protect employees and to support employees? And then I think it's really about engagement from the leaders. So many times, a lot of leaders will sit in their office and they are busy. No questions asked. They're busy. They're swamped. They have, a company to run, but very unoften do they grab their cup of coffee and go walk around the office. Hey, Sharon, how are you today? How was your weekend? Right? I had an employee, I'll digress for a sec. I had an employee who had a manager who was this is work, this is personal, and the two don't mix. So this manager never talked about work or his personal life. And so one Friday they were all talking, and he had said, oh yeah, I'm going skiing with my family this weekend. And boys kind of went, oh my God.
You're human.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I think it's relating to your employees there, because as I said at the very beginning, we spend so much time at work that it's important to get to know people on a personal level, even if you're not inviting them over to your house, right? So I think there's a fine balance there that impacts your culture day to day.
Yes, absolutely. I think like I said, we're all human, right? We all have personal lives. It doesn't have to be you're coming over to my barbecue this weekend, but I think it is
Exactly.
important to get to know each other, know who your employees are. And I mean, we spend more time at work than we do at home. So I think having that relationship is really important. And that's what ultimately makes people want to stay because they're happy with who they're working for.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's awesome. So thank
Yeah.
you, Ashley, for answering all of those questions and
You're
chatting with
welcome.
us about all the different tools and strategies for businesses when it comes to, managing and leading their employees. I think those are all really great points. We still have some time left if anyone on here has some questions. So again, there is a chat box here if you want to write out some questions that you have. Feel free to do that now. I do have a couple questions, Ashley, for you that just came in through our email here, so we can go through that while everyone's typing out their comments in the meantime. So one here, back to COVID again. So if you are an employee, if you have an employee that calls in sick,
Okay.
as an employer, are you allowed to ask if they have COVID, COVID symptoms, or if they've been tested?
Yeah, and I think, again, I'll premise it, I'm not an employment lawyer, so I don't have the hard answer on this
Yeah.
but best practices that I've seen is, yeah, it is appropriate. I think, even when I go to the chiropractor, it's, do you have flu symptoms? Do you have this? Do you have this? Right. And I think that, it's perfectly acceptable for the employer, given the nature of the circumstance, to say, is this absence COVID related? Right. And
Right.
that's a general blanket statement, because employers can't ask prognosis. So they can't ask, why did you go to the doctor? Or what are your symptoms? They can just say, oh, you're sick. Great. Do you have a medical note to support that? Right. And so you have to protect employees' privacy. And so that's number one. But yeah, ask them if the absence is COVID related. And if they say yes, then you can say, great. Are you on track to be tested? Once you have been tested and get your results, please let us know the results of your test. And if they say, no, this is not COVID related, then you have to trust them as the employer, and just respect their illness. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I want to call in sick today. I'm not feeling well, but it's such a scary thing right now because of COVID. And there are still people that will get sick that aren't COVID related. And so we have to support them too, regardless of the pandemic and how long it lasts. So the short answer is yes.
Yeah, and I hear you about some people having some minor symptoms like, oh, I have a sore throat today. Should I tell my employer? You're leery of even telling your coworkers because you don't want that fear to spread and that all of a sudden now you're off work for 2 weeks. Because there's that concern that maybe you have COVID. So yeah, I agree that there has to be some privacy.
Well, there does, but as the employee on that note, I would call HealthLink and talk to them about your symptoms before you just say, oh, I don't want to tell my the employees that I have a sore throat. Because now, and I've heard this might not be true today, but I've heard that one of the symptoms of COVID could be a headache. And so we did have somebody call in and say, I've got a migraine today. I'm not coming in. And all of a sudden that rang off the COVID bells, right? And so make sure you call 811 if you need to have that confidential conversation, because it's not worth putting your fellow coworkers at risk.
Absolutely. Definitely feel for those that have those chronic migraines and get them on a regular basis, like especially now, like you can't keep taking time off work all the time, but I understand you have to protect the people around you, and it is, like you said, a symptom. So
yeah.
So next question I have for you, and this was a big one. How do you help an underperforming staff member? I'm sure a lot of businesses struggle with that and would love to hear your answer on that.
Yeah, and I mean, that goes back to what are the biggest HR challenges, and I think this is one of them, right? Yeah. I would say first and foremost, have a process for how you handle underperforming employees and make it known to the employees so that employees know, look, if I'm underperforming, this is the process that the employer is going to follow. Because if you don't, you could run into doing it one way for one person and one way for another. And then perception becomes reality. And then the question of favoritism and nepotism and all these other things may come up. And so just to avoid that, I would say have what I call a progressive discipline policy in place, that just outlines that, this goal or performance improvement plan is another name for it. The process of this is to improve your performance. And then I would say sit down and have an informal conversation and just bring up those things that maybe they aren't hitting the mark on, follow up with an email to say further to our conversation, here's a summary of our chat. And then should it continue, then you go into the formal steps of actually documenting it and asking the employee to sign and putting together a performance plan that will help them improve with goals. And ultimately, you know, not every employee is a really good fit. And unfortunately that could result in ending the relationship. But obviously the goal is there to work with the employees. And so it takes effort, it takes time, that a lot of managers might say right now, listening to this, I don't have time for that. But
Yeah.
that's the job of us as managers, is to invest in our people and have them grow with us. And so in part of developing a good culture, in part of succession planning, part of growing your business, that's part of it, is having those conversations. So that's how I'd answer that question in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah, and a good employer will do that, and especially right now, like there's so many people looking for work, but I really hope that employers are taking the time to work with the staff that they do have and to make that person a good fit, right? So I don't see any other further questions in the chat group. Give you a couple more seconds here to put that in.
No worries.
Okay, looks like we're good. So again, anyone, if you have any further questions after this that maybe you will think of later or just didn't feel comfortable putting that in the chat box, again, you can contact either one of us and we'll get that answered for you. So again, thank you everyone for watching this webinar today, and for Ashley for going through all these questions with us. As always, like I just said, please reach out to us if you have any other questions. I'll be emailing out our contact information again, so you'll have that. This webinar was being recorded, so we will send out the recorded copy as well, so you can rewatch it. If you know of anyone that maybe wasn't able to be a part of the live webinar, you can share it out with them as well. We are going to be doing some more of these webinars, so I hope that you check out our website and look for other future ones that are coming up. We would love to hear your feedback. If you have any other suggestions of webinars that you would like to see, maybe you would like to be part of one in the future, please message me. I'd love to hear from you guys. We love doing these kinds of videos and want to keep making sure that we're doing more of these and keeping you guys engaged and providing information that's relevant and interesting to you guys. So thanks again, Ashley, for being a part of this and being our guest speaker today, and for all of you guys for giving up part of your lunch break. I appreciate that. All right, everyone, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your lunch and your day.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Thanks to everybody who attended. Have a great day.